Who's going to listen anyway?
Good to be here. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's our pleasure, everyone. This is Vince Staskel. It's going to be a great interview here, talking a bit about Vince's early career and how he got started in the disability rights movement back in school. So let's just kick it off, Vince, and talk a little bit about your early days. I imagine it was probably pretty frustrating for you, especially after reading your article in the UK Times there about having cerebral palsy and trying to like negotiate. I mean, you talk about the stairs at school, trying to get up once you started getting into broadcasting and things like that. Could you walk us through a little bit more about the frustration as a kid and how you overcame some of those frustrations, as you've done so very well with most of your life?
Well, there wasn't a lot of frustrations, to be honest with you, because that's the only way I knew how to get around. I played baseball using my Canadian crutches. If I couldn't play on a certain day, I was the umpire. My mother and I, we were in I was born 70 years ago with cerebral palsy, so every second of my life I've been disabled. I didn't start using a wheelchair until I was about 16 years of age. I had operations on my arm and I could not use my crutches anymore. So they put me in a manual wheelchair for a few years, which I laboriously managed with one arm to get around with help from friends and things. But in the very beginning, like I said, there wasn't a lot of frustration because it was the only thing I knew how to do. My friends were very accepting of me. Like I said, if I couldn't play a certain sport, I either I was a referee or an umpire or something like that. And every once in a while I would be a coach. And like I said, I would also bat with my wheelchair on the baseball field. So, and even during school time, my mother would hold me up in the field where I would try to field baseballs and things. So it was not as frustrating until I got older, because like I said, it was just an acceptable part of my life. Of course, there was no such thing as accessibility back in the 50s and 60s, particularly the 60s. 50s and 60s, my primary time getting around in school, I was in late 50s, early 60s. But my mother, what I featured in the UK article was that my mother and I would walk with my Canadian crutches up two long, steep inclines in our hometown to get to school, and I would walk up and down with her to these classrooms. They did arrange that I did not, during those days when you were in grade school, you went from room to room to room and upstairs and downstairs. Well, they arranged that one accommodation, I guess, was that I could stay in the same room all day. So the students would come to me and I would just be in the room for another class, and the teacher would come from another class into the room. So that was not a big deal. Again, in high school, I did not go to high school because of the fact that the building was totally condemned. My brother, yeah. And also getting on and off the school bus was not the funnest thing either. My brother used to tell me, Vince, I can't even walk up those steps. I don't know how you could. So I was homeschooled until I got a GED, and then I went on to college. My very first, in my late teens, I became very, very interested in broadcasting. I wanted to be a disc jockey so bad. I did even, they had me at my local radio station. It was like a go for. So I just loved being with the DJs and getting to know them and answering the phones and getting the news and things like that. And it was in my wheelchair at the time, so it wasn't that laborious for me to do. But I was accepted in a local broadcasting program at our local, what was a regional community college. It was about 75 miles away, and I was just elated. I said, oh my God, my mom and dad, we drove up 75 miles to the school in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And I was met by the the head of the broadcasting department, and the dean of liberal arts at the time. And they stood there and looked at me, and all I could see was this very long 70, at least 60-step stairway up into where they would do the broadcasting school classes, and would not even have, without even a handrail. So you could see they turned white. Oh my God.
Okay.
And I just was so disappointed. But they said, listen, you can go take regular liberal arts class, go for 2 years in a less inaccessible part of this campus, which was still inaccessible, but not as bad as the broadcasting studios. So I went for 2 years and got an associate degree. And I went on to a 4-year school, and they wanted to take theater. I wanted to try to be a director. I couldn't be a broadcaster, so maybe a director and a playwright. Well, that was a little easier, but still pretty inaccessible for me. They wanted to train me as a sound technician, combine my love of music and radio, and maybe use it in the theaters as sound tech. And we went on the road. I was touring with our in competition for a college play competition, and some of the studios I would have to be carried up, and it was very inconvenient. Not exactly. Sometimes I even bumped myself, and I would be bumped, and people didn't know how. I mean, that's the thing. People don't know how to hold you, and they're shaking you, and they're scared. So I just had a second thought about it, and said, well, I don't know. Maybe theater is not exactly the best career for me. I'm not going to go for 4 years and know that I could not probably not get a job in the theater field, broadcasting or whatever. And a friend of mine was a guidance counselor, a father of a friend of mine, said, why don't you try to be a rehab counselor? He said, you're perfect. I mean, you're great. I mean, you deal with people beautifully. You know disability. I was in my early 20s at the time. Said, why don't you pursue a degree in rehabilitation counseling? So again, my second, okay, but I was under the state OVR, Office of Vocational Rehabilitation Training Program, so they would pay for me. So I said, all right, I'll try. So I went to Penn State, finished up my 4-year degree in rehab counseling, got a job back home as a vocational evaluator. I loved it. It was great. I did that for a couple of years. And then my friend, who was a good friend of mine in college at Penn State, and said, I'm at Mansfield State College, which is at northern Pennsylvania. He said, they have programs for people that want, if you get a scholarship, you can get a master's degree in special ed. So again, okay, I'll do that. And went up and got a degree in special education. I wasn't really a teacher, but I got the degree. I got the background in knowing disabilities, and how to write plans and IEPs and vocational rehab plans and things. And I ended up a 32-year career. I retired 10 years ago with a 32-year career as a disability rights advocate and ADA consultant. Americans with Disability Act consultant. So it was a long road, and I loved it very much, but I never lost my interest for show business and broadcasting and things like that.
Well, that shows, because you are quite comfortable in front of the camera here, and you sound great. So it doesn't really come as a surprise to me. That was one of your first loves. and you continue it on today, which we're very excited to see firsthand here. Can you tell us a bit more about your rehab counseling days? I mean, that's something that's Markarian Robotics. We're not looking at, obviously, consulting for that particular space, but looking to help people in that space that are going through some mobility issues because of an accident, because of obviously a disability. I hate using that word, but can you tell us a bit about some of the struggles you saw with people and some of the ways they overcame some of the problems they have? I mean, I'm sure some things are timeless. This might have been a while back, of course, but I'm sure you dealt with some similar issues today.
Oh yeah, well, back then, my first job was working as a vocational evaluator in an old, no longer used sheltered workshop situation, and I worked with a lot of mentally challenged clients. They were beautiful, wonderful, some physically disabled clients, and I did a vocational evaluations for them. And I did that for about 2 years, and some counseling, but mostly it was vocational evaluations, training them to see what kind of vocation they could pursue, what they were interested in, and see if we can match their interests with what we had available or what other agencies had available and things. But back then, sheltered workshops, although they said we're working to get these clients out of the sheltered workshop into a employment normalized setting, some of the best workers in the sheltered workshop were kept there because they did a great job and they were able to get more contracts from companies to do, whatever spec work they had, and the typical stereotypical putting pins together and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I although they weren't totally resistant to that, but the parents were. The parents did not want, and this is going back in the 70s and things. It wasn't like it is today as far as attitudes were concerned. Hmm. But a lot of the parents, and I would I would see the client, this person's able to do this, or this person's able to do that. They should not be here in a workshop. They should be working, in a normalized regular employment. And some of the parents really didn't like that. And they complained to the executive director. The director of the workshop, who became a very good friend of mine, defended me and says, "You write down whatever you believe these clients can be capable of doing, and I'll take it from there." So, like I said, I got a lot of resistance from parents. So I don't want my child going out. And these children were my age, and 20s, 30s, 40s years of age. And they would tell me, "I don't want to be doing this anymore." And they would even say to me, "Vince, I have been working as a dishwasher at a fast food, at a Wendy's for 12, 13 years. I'll still work as a dishwasher, but can I at least go to another fast food something different?"
Yeah, change it up a bit.
Yeah. And people that are working with, their face would drop. I said, Joey doesn't want to, he's tired of being the third floor janitor for 15, 20 years. He said, who wouldn't be tired of something like people have high functioning jobs, higher jobs they don't like doing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
20, 30 years. Yeah. So I waved them goodbye and I went on to get, as I said, to get my master's degree. And I came back to my home area and got involved in independent living. That was back in the days when it was just starting, the independent living centers. And I had the opportunity of founding, after working at one, I founded another one. Me and a couple of friends, we founded an independent living center. And I was on the board of directors and that kind of thing for a few years. And I just kind of went on. I said, this is fine. I'm doing this. This is great, but I want to move on. And at the time, the ADA was, well, we also did it for Section 504, which was, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
Government would give funding to private companies who got federal funding to make their buildings accessible and make their programs accessible. So my brother, who was a uh, businessman, he was actually a electrical engineer. He had his own uh, consulting business himself. Well, we got together and we started a private company doing ADA consulting. And, excuse me. And at the time, we won the local Dutchess County, New York. I don't know if you're familiar with Dutchess County, Poughkeepsie area.
I am, yeah. I'm from
Yeah,
upstate myself.
you're from up north,
Yep.
upstate,
Yeah. Small world.
upstate. Well, anyway, so we did that, and we got some not a huge amount of money, but I became an ADA consultant, and I worked in the governmental sectors. I worked with governments, local governments that were getting the federal funding to make themselves wheelchair accessible. So I did that for about a couple of years, my brother and I. And again, the money kind of dried up, and the whatever we could do in our counties to make it accessible. Like I said, my Dutchess County, although it is now more accessible, back when I did it, I said it was more accessible on paper than it was actually in physical fact. But a lot of people started becoming accessible, and then I got hired to do the ADA transportation accessibility for the Dutchess County bus system and the city of Poughkeepsie bus system. So again, about a little less than a year, I developed and drafted the held community meetings with disabled people and consumers and advocates and things. And we put together this plan, and we made Dutchess County bus system ADA accessible. And that was something, accomplishment that I tell people, you see that bus? Well, you're on there because I got you on
Yeah,
there.
you're welcome.
I don't brag, but I do like to tell people who people are kind of, I said, well, I did that. Oh,
Yeah.
and anyway, so I did that. And the last half of my working career, I worked at legal services in Dutchess County. And we had a state grant that I was an ADA, I was a disability rights advocate for Dutchess County. I mean, for the Hudson Valley Legal Services.
Mm.
And I did that for 11 years. I had a caseload of 7 counties, and we would travel around. My driver and I, we would go primarily do Social Security disability appeals, and I would represent the clients at hearings. We would develop evidence that they were disabled and match it with Social Security regulations, and see how close we can get to showing the judge at the judges, the ALJs, administrative law judges of Social Security, that this person, although they don't meet the exact criteria for automatic disability, they are close enough. And we would present evidence, and we would, they would come in and present themselves and the various disabilities. But a few times before I was well known in that line of work, people thought I was the client.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I understand. Even the judges, oh, I'm sorry, but you're in a wheelchair and this guy isn't. I'm in a 3-piece suit and things. I did not have this facial hair.
No.
And, and some of the clients were not exactly that well dressed. But I would say, yeah, no, I'm the rep, and that's the client.
Mm.
Well, anyway, I did that for 11 years and I retired when I was 60 years old, 10 years ago. And at the time, while I was retired, I went back with my interest in show business.
Mm.
A gentleman in Connecticut who was a character actor, Howard Renenstan. You see him on, you would recognize him if you saw him. He had a daughter who was disabled, and she wanted to be an actress, and she was getting a lot of resistance. So I said, darn it. He said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my best to develop an all disabled television cable channel. And he called it With TV. And I was one of the early people. I see this on the net and I go, oh, yeah, look, it's great, it's great. And I contacted him and he said, help me. And unfortunately, the project did not succeed.
Hmm.
We had a hard time getting funding. I actually did kind of what I do with Eileen now. I did social media promotion and I did volunteer recruitment for him. And we would get people who were various actors and people who could stand-up comedians. Are good friends of mine were stand-up sit-down comedians, but they were disabled and they were performers. They were all behind us, and we did all we could to make this happen. But unfortunately, it did not.
Which
But
is unfortunate because but it sounds like by this time in your career, you had a lot of nonprofit experience, government
yeah,
experience,
yeah,
business experience,
yeah.
legal experience, and of course, media and broadcasting. At that point, it sounded like a perfect time for this to happen. But of course, as time went on, it came back again and gave you
Yeah.
another shot at it.
Yes. Well, we Howard, dear Howard, he wanted to do that, but mostly by himself. He was doing the presentation of the project and things, and he wanted to take that on as himself as his own personal effort. Not just me, we were a few of us. We would line up different things and people to contact and possible grants. Although this was a private company, there were not too many governmental grants or grants available for private companies. We looked into foundations and things, but well, let's just suffice it to say, unfortunately, it did not happen.
Mm.
Uh, Along came a good buddy of mine from Chicago, Rob Pritz, who took over a radio podcast, an internet podcast and he had his company, Able Pathways Media. And to be honest with you, I was thinking today, dear, I don't know how we connected, but we connected somehow. Oh, I think, don't remember that. He wanted me to be his first guest. That's what happened. And I talked about, and the only thing I could talk about that was really interesting, except for other than myself, was my interest in broadcasting and acting and making Hollywood accessible and inclusion of disabled actors and more jobs and opportunities. So he loved that, and we did the half-hour show. And he said, would you like to produce for me? He said, it sounds like you know a lot of people. Yeah, okay. And I ended up doing 45 podcasts for him. We produced, and I helped co-host a little bit. And we covered all spectrum of disability, sports, uh, mental health, physical health, adaptability, acting. Few people, actors, would come on and be interviewed by Rob, and even a couple of the big name disability advocates who were in Hollywood. Alan Rucker would come on. He's a writer and things. And someone else that I got to know came on and did a show. A young lady by the name of Eileen Gruber.
I was about to say, someone's probably coming into the picture here.
And I first got an email when I was back with TV from Eileen Gruber. And I think I even told her this. I was getting so many emails, and Howard was forwarding so many things to me that barely looked at the email. I apologized to her. I said, I'm sorry. I would get 50, 60 things, do this, do that, run this and that. And I sat back one day and I said, we were thinking, and back doing the show with Rob Pritz's Able Pathways podcast. And I said, I remember this lady. And I looked and I found this, we screened down the emails I had, and there was Eileen Gruber. And I said, oh, wow, this is great. She told me about herself and what she was doing with disability and acting, and she was a disabled performer herself. So I contacted her. She did the show, and I guess the rest is history.
Well, what was the first meeting like besides, being swept off your feet and your jaw hitting the floor? What was it
well,
like?
well, we were, what we, I didn't meet her physically. I've never actually met Eileen physically. I only on the phone and
I
on
see. I see what you're saying.
every day
That
on
makes
the
sense
internet.
with the distance. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, like I said, 3,000 miles away, I might as well be on another planet
Yeah.
from Hollywood. But anyway, we're in constant touch now. And now we're doing FaceTime like you guys.
Great.
But
Next best thing.
and I said, would you like to be on this show? She said, yeah. And she came on and did her show. And I, after a while, the Able Pathways, my buddy Rob, I love him, if he's listening, he said he needed to stick with he was getting married and he needed to stick with his day job. So the radio thing, the podcast thing was kind of faded away.
Hmm.
So I was still, on internet, and I at the time with TV did have a web page, and I would put things on the web page. Although we didn't have a TV thing, we would keep the web page and do basically what we do with the trained actors is promote media type things related to disability, and got got hooked up with Eileen, and I became her co-administrator. Excuse me. And again, I've been doing that for a few years now, and I love it very much. Another gentleman, another person in Hollywood who gave me a lot of encouragement was, in addition to Eileen, was a writer and performer and producer, Herbie J. Pilato. And Herbie J., I kind of met him on a comedy show in Orange County. He would call in and talk about classic TV. And again, I'm not really sure how we connected, but I contacted him in some way. And I would be on the comedy show a couple of times talking about with TV, and I'd call in and we do things or talk about different things, goofy things. And I connected with him, and he had me writing for him on his blog, and I started writing pieces about, again, media and disability, and he wrote a book about Life Goes On, which was the first television show
You made
on
the basis
series
for that show. I remember that. Yeah.
with Chris Burke, who was Down syndrome, and he was an actor, and he wrote a book about it. And of course, I just ate the book up. I hardly knew Herbie at the time. And again, I did a couple of things on his blog he put on. I said, Vince, you got to write on your own. He said, you do a good job. Get your own blog going. And I said, oh, hey, thank you very much. I'll do that. And he said, I'm starting up, unfortunately, it was disbanded because he's so overworked. He no longer has the Classic TV Preservation Society. But I was on the board of directors of that. And again, this is all done virtually. I was not in Hollywood or anything. But he wanted me to represent, people like Chris Burke and speak up for inclusion, because Herbie was a very, very big advocate for inclusion and for disabled performers. and that's what I did that for a long time. I still help administer a couple of his pages, his classic TV fun page, and also I still manage his uh, web Facebook page about the book Life Goes On, and whatever stories we can, or just general stories about disability, we'll put on that page. So that's basically what I do now. I've been doing that with Eileen, and I've been doing that with Herbie for quite a while now, and
Yeah.
it's just been a wonderful experience. And I get to meet guys like you.
That's probably the best part, I'd have to say, huh? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, and it's actually been a wonderful experience working primarily with Eileen and taking her direction, and we, like I said, putting together what we do as far as disability and as far as promoting performers. It's just a great love for me. I was able with Herbie and with Eileen to combine my interests, and it's perfect. It's disability, entertainment, advocacy, performing, all of that, all combined in one, and I'm just blessed to be able to do it. I can't wait to get up in the morning to work on this stuff.
It sounds like that really is your passion. You're hitting on all six cylinders for the most part, and it suits you very well. I mean, we haven't known each other too long, and once Eileen introduced us to you, like you tell right off the bat, like this guy's got some history. He's done incredible things for this entire movement, starting back from your days, but even before college. Vince, if you had some advice you want to pass on with people, either now with mobility issues or trying to get into acting, broadcasting, any kind of entertainment, what would you tell them?
Well, first of all, stick with it. I mean, that is everybody's first response, is to stick with it, follow your dreams. I will say today, in the 21st century, things are changing for the better in Hollywood. Matter of fact, I just posted an article on our page about the uh, Film Academy, the Oscars, are going to do everything they can now to produce and present and create more opportunities for disabled performers. Eileen Gruber, who is a wonderful actress, she has a Emmy nominated. Her episode on New Amsterdam, which mirrored her life almost to the T, almost a cancer person who was disabled through medical malpractice, if you will. And she did a fantastic job for that. She's up for an Emmy, and we find that the Emmy organization itself is open to uh, hiring more disabled people. Uh, the Oscars is the Producers Guild of America, so it's easier for a person to get at least a shot. And we always say the more training you have, the more professional you are, the better it is for you to get a job. You can't just say, "Well, today I want to be an actor. I better get it. I'm going to get a job." You prepare yourself, do the work, and become as proficient as you can in that field. And there's more opportunities for you to succeed. I always, always, always push networking. If you want to become an actor, go to your local community theater. Get to know people in all lines of show business, whatever it is. Get to know people and networking. And I said that's why I'm on your show, because of networking. So always, and it is easier to do, but you still have to do the work to get there
Mm.
and to be known. Get yourself known. The world is more wheelchair accessible and accessible in other ways, not just wheelchairs, but in other disabilities. It's more accessible. There still needs to be work done, but it is happening, and it's a little easier for you to go out and do those things. So I would say just love what you do and pursue it to the hills. I always do that. I get into something 100%. I'm subscribed to all anything I can about disability and media, books, programs, newsletters, meetings, whatever I can to present myself and present what I'm doing. And it's better because the networking is a major uh, component in your success. So that's basically it.
Nice. Vince, couldn't have said it better myself. Vince Staskel, thanks so much for decades of advocacy work
Yeah.
and coming on and speaking to us. I'll post your story from the UK site. I'll post Eileen Gruba's clip from New Amsterdam
Yes.
as well as a link to this interview. Great time as always. We love speaking to you. We love to have you back again very soon. Of course, we'll be in touch after this is over. You're going to get sick of us. I'll warn you. You're probably going to be sick of us.
I enjoy working with you guys very much, and you're tapping into an area that I know a little bit about. So I'm
sounds like it.
I get so busy sometimes I don't even bother to shave.
Yeah. Well, me too. Sometime
Yeah.
in a couple months, maybe I'll be as
Gabby
pronounced
Hay.
as attractive as
Gabby.
yours is.
Yeah.
I can only be
Gabby
so
Hay.
lucky. Yeah. All right. Vince, thanks so much for the work. Thanks so much for joining us today. And we'll be in touch real soon. Everyone.
Mike, thank you very much. Good luck to you guys, and good luck to Markarian Robotics, and hire you guys. As I said here, they are going to be huge.
Let's hope for it. We'll see what
All
happens.
right, my man.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Talk
much,
to you
Vince.
later.
Thank you, sir. Take
Have
care,
a good
everyone.
day.
You too.
Bye
Take care.
bye.
Bye.